90 back in Brooklyn. I forgot. Yeah, so 89, 90. Yeah, is when I started helping churches set up little back in Brooklyn.
Oh, audio just popped in.
Yeah.
Shame. And you call yourself a professional.
You know. But yeah, late 80s, early 90s. At that time, it was just like a machine to set up so somebody could do print bulletins and be able to do basic stuff like that. But that's where it started.
Well, computers were ancient back then, so we
And
understand.
it wasn't about networking yet.
That's true. That's true. They were at well, we're not going to date ourselves.
Standalone and floppy disk passing.
Yep. So last but not least, Colin. Oh, well, I guess I would be last. But Colin, go ahead. How many years have you been working with it?
Over 30.
Over 30.
Yeah. It's been a minute.
I haven't been doing it as long as 30 years, but it's about 24 years now. Wow, that's a long time. I remember when we got our first computer in the church. Raise your hand if you bought your church's first computer.
You know, to be completely honest, I don't remember a computer being in my church growing up ever.
Really?
I have no memory of a church computer. Maybe there was one in accounting for tithe or something, you know, but zero exposure with computers at church.
Wow.
Yeah.
We got one in the early 90s. It was a pivotal time.
It was a pivotal time.
There's so much that surrounded that computer, not because of the computer itself, but it's too long. It's too long of a story to tell. But I remember when we got our first computer. It was the early 90s. It's probably around 1990.
Yeah, I was off to college by then, so
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, time has flown. But I mean, the question really is about burnout. With the amount of years that you guys have put in, what has led to even the thought of burnout? And feel free to just.
I can't answer that question because mine was a very one-word answer, and I feel like I can't say it because we have to have an atmosphere of positivity.
And church.
Church. This is true.
Well, you know, I had a friend that was talking about having a season of yes, and I think I might have gone the opposite way. You know, the season of no, and because I've, you know, even to this day, still volunteer at multiple churches, but I pretty much throttled my activity. I said, you know, I will be on, you know, one Sabbath per month. Or really, it's, you know, I'll do the third week, you know, the third Sabbath, and that's about it, right? And for anywhere else I volunteer, it's kind of like, oh, you're having problems? Give me a call. You know, I'll come by and do what I can. But, you know, I realize there's a lot of things. I just, you know, I'm too busy doing a lot of volunteer stuff for too many people. And, you know, at some point you just, you can't do it all. So I've really been picking and choosing where I spend my time. That's how I've been coping with that.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much along the lines of what Colin's saying, you know, I feel myself kind of getting to that point now. You know, I've been at this for quite a while, just doing what I can, you know, to help out at my local church and then other churches as they've needed some help. But, you know, after kind of just being at it heavy and doing things constantly and being here, there, and everywhere, you just kind of get to the point where it's like, all right, look, I need to kind of relax a little bit. I need to chill. And, you know, so I'm starting to kind of get to that point where it's like, okay, I need to kind of pull things back in a little and kind of refocus my efforts and figure out, you know, some of the things that I want to accomplish and do and how I can be more effective or most effective. Right. Because, I mean, the other truth of the matter is as you get more knowledge too, you know, if you're staying in the same situation, you don't grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you don't grow, you stagnate. And
you know,
you stagnate, you're done.
a friend of mine, we just had a conversation about this recently, and I was trying to pull her out of her. She loved her church. She did quite a bit there. And I was trying to pull her out just little by little, go out, see the world, see how other people do this. And it's sort of what we're trying to do here with the community. We all go to different churches and we sort of encounter the same different problem or the different same problem. And just being able to talk about it and talk to each other, that actually could help with burnout because we're not butting heads against the same problem without any assistance. So I was trying to pull her out. And now that she's able to go to other places and work with other people, she's enjoying it a bit more. And I think that would help. Maybe we should just swap churches one day. All of us just go to each other's church and fulfill our roles. And maybe that would help. The rest of the audience wouldn't like it. The congregation wouldn't like it. The pastor sure wouldn't like it. But
AV
it might be good for
the new
us.
series coming from church AV professionals.
But the thing is, they would appreciate y'all when y'all got back, though.
That's right.
I mean, it's
Maybe
one of those
not.
things, though, right?
Well,
You
not
have
if they thought
that
it was
like
premeditated.
profit in own land syndrome.
Yeah,
You
oh,
say
yeah.
the same thing
Oh, yeah.
over and over and over and over again, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'll just get Robert and Colin to come over, and they'll say it, and then it will be the law of the land.
Sad to say that works.
Yeah, it does.
That works.
As long as I can get a consulting fee for it, sure.
Well, you see, now you've crossed over the road. What does the NCAA call it? Student athletes. So right now we're technically student athletes, and you want to talk about being professional. That's a whole other topic. We'll get into that. I mean, we've been meaning to talk about that some other time. Compensation. I'll ask this. Do you think compensation would help avoid burnout?
So I'll say this: you guys are you gentlemen have a more challenging responsibility in your churches for what you have to manage and the ever increasing expectation, right? Because and there are two reasons for it. One, people see what other people do with audio and video, and so that's what they expect you to do. I have the advantage that other people have trouble with their computers. So anything I do with the computer is magical and will placate them. All right. So in that sense, I have an advantage, and I've been able to make different decisions about how I interact. So for me, the decision I made really, really early was I would take no pay. It was strictly volunteer, and I would decide when I could show up and when I couldn't. And there was no leverage on me because I was taking nothing. And I found that was a much better way to operate, because as soon as people give you 2 mites, they feel that they own you and that you need to match these particular, objectives according to in their mind, right? And not getting that money means that they know that they don't have that leverage and they behave accordingly, which I've found.
Okay.
Again, y'all have it more challenging, so I know that.
How many of us have been treated with no mites like they owned us?
Absolutely. I was just about to say that, Robert. I don't think there'd be much of a change in the attitude from church leadership with paid volunteers, professionals, unpaid volunteers, from what I've seen over the past decade with AV.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the people there was maybe one time when you could have virtually unskilled. By unskilled, I mean, they're not doing this for a living. Maybe they had some minimal training, but they didn't have, say, some at least tangential outside connection to the function they're performing every weekend for the worship service, right? I'll give you an example. There's one pastor who called me up and essentially said he wanted his church to look like Elevation Church, right? Now, don't do that, Robert.
Is your reaction a sign of burnout? How do you tell? At what point do you contact a medical or a mental health professional?
Mm-hmm.
right? So this pastor's team is virtually 100% volunteer. I think, on occasion they, pre-COVID, they had a professional come in to run the soundboard from time to time. But the expectations are of, your $10 million a year AV megachurch budget and your, paid staff and stipend interns to, okay, we have a $10,000 a year budget just to maintain the stuff to get the video or AV or whatever you call it ministry going, and you have a complete volunteer base. That the expectations are still the same. Make it look like that with what we give you. And even when you get, like, say 75% there, and to me, it's neither here. I've been doing this so long, it's just part of the course, but I found a lot of and I'm not silly enough to take a directorship like you, Robert, or you, Corral. So so I don't get into that frustration because I've just been here too long. But I've found that, you have folks coming in after work every day. You have them in on Sunday. You have them in on Saturday. They're doing the weddings, the prayer meetings, the Sabbath school,
funerals,
the divine service, youth service, funerals,
rehearsals.
Sound
for
check.
years.
Sound check. I was going to say
check.
sound check, but we don't do
And
those,
then,
right?
it was what really disturbed me, and hopefully the friends of mine who happen to be pastors, and we went to school together, and we were kicked around together and stuff, and are now leading their own ministries. Take some heed in this. It's not about the pay. It could be about the pay. Pay is great, but that's not what these folks are volunteering mostly their time for, right? A little recognition goes a huge way. What really disturbed me was we were maybe 6 months into the pandemic before I heard one pastor even acknowledge the AV team outside of that's not the right scripture. Do you know what I mean?
Oh boy.
So
Oh,
I'll
Sounds
leave
right
it at
scripture,
that.
but you gave it to me 5 minutes before we started. Oh wait, sorry, we're not going there today.
Yes, I don't, I'm trying hard not to, because I have heard those speeches. I have heard why don't I look like TD Jakes? And I said, why don't I get TD Jakes' budget? We don't have that budget. We don't have people who are there all the time. So like you said, the expectations were too high. Is recognition enough? I struggle with recognition.
The lack of recognition is too little. Recognition would help tremendously, because I know even in for the little that I did at times, in the sense of it wasn't a big deal, but it helped somebody. For somebody to come back and say, "Well, I really thank you. You helped me put on a good program," and I'm like, "Okay, Cloud9, we're good," right? Because it's something simple. It's an acknowledgement of the humanity of the situation.
Yes.
And I think one of the bigger things that people need to look at is why do you do what you do, right? So one of the big things for me and why I serve and give back my time was, one, it was poured into me, right? So that's one of the reasons why I turn back around and give back. But then the other reason is because I know I'm gifted at technology. That may not be the pastor's or the speaker's primary mode of being able to bless folks. Things might go real south if they started touching all the technical stuff. But the big thing for me is if I can bless them by allowing them to focus on their presentation so that they can really do a real good job there, then they're a blessing to the audience. I've done my job. Now, does that mean that I get the big thank you at the end? No, but usually it's those side conversations for me at the side. hey, thank you for helping me out. I was able to focus and do this, and that allowed me to really this that. Those are the little moments for me that I tend to savor more so than the bigger recognition. Now, I will say this. There was, big momentous event, for us in our church over at the headquarters of my job where, we put on our annual meetings for the fall on Zoom. Painstaking effort to try to do all of that with interpretation elements and presentation elements and a lot of things that Zoom probably wasn't really programmed to be doing all simultaneously, highly effectively with multiple people controlling all the controls. And we did get a big thank you from the folks upstairs, for that historic kind of moment, because it was the first time we ever did anything like that virtually. But those moments come few and far between. But when they do that, all right, cool. But like the bigger thing is the more personal moments when that happens for me.
I guess. Go ahead.
But no, I mean, I was going to try and hit all points. I mean, I think for me, it's like an acknowledgement of my humanity is important. Acknowledgement of my skills and the value I bring, and I'm trying to be in spaces where in places where people appreciate that. I may give them a hard time about certain things, but when they know that I'm bringing certain, something, I try and bring a certain level of quality. And, for me, it's always a ministry. The ironic thing about a lot of what we do is if we do it well, you don't notice. Everything happens, nothing goes wrong. You don't know we exist. That is what we shoot for. And because of that, it's people are used to and accustomed to acknowledging the thing that's in front of them.
Sure.
And sometimes when we do a great job, we don't get the recognition because people just take it for granted. And when you set a standard where people can expect that speaks volume to what you're able to do, but it also it's one of those things where when I get the acknowledgement, you don't always get it because people don't quite appreciate the lack of knowledge about what it takes to get from A to B is astounding. And the thing is, compensation does make it better, but I will agree. I don't like feeling like, oh yeah, I'm getting compensated so they own me. Frankly, they can't afford my regular rate based on my training and my expertise for my primary means of employment. So
And that's
unless you want to try and beat it, because hey, God bless you. If you want to beat it, sure. But I'm not doing it for the compensation because I'm getting my coins somewhere else. This is a ministry for me, and it's always about being in spaces where I like being in spaces where people appreciate what I bring to the table. And I think that's a big part of it. And to combat burnout, if I don't like the environment, I don't feel like it's going to be positive for me. The mental health tool is to remove yourself from that situation and to critically think about how it's affecting you as a person, emotionally, physically, spiritually. I mean, it's really about the humanity. I think that's one of the things with church in general. Are we really nailing at getting at people's humanity? Or are we just treating every view that's online as a number and not a person when we're talking about online services? And I think, technology and AV is a great ministry, especially for young people that want to leverage their skills on mediums and platforms that people don't even recognize are ministries tools. And my big thing to avoid burnout is, one, disconnect when I need to, but also if we can train and develop a workforce and a culture that's supportive, but also shares the load, I think we're in a better place. You don't get, recognition as much for being the Iron Man sometimes as much as the mentor.
I do look at it a little bit differently because of all the years that we put in, and I, like Andrew, I never wanted to be compensated for what I did on Saturdays. On our Sabbath worship time, I didn't want to be compensated. First of all, it's the whole premise of thou shalt not do any work on the Sabbath, though we know I used to get in my most steps on Sabbath, just running up and down the stairs. But it was just the idea of that's me giving back. I think when the expectations started to push into things where they needed you there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where you couldn't get to Saturday. You couldn't get Saturday done without the rest of the week. I think we were starting to push it. When people starting to call you during the week and not talk about what they needed on Saturday, and then you can hear their tone to you changes because everyone had their 5 minutes on the stage and they thought their 5 minutes were the most important. And so everything just had to be right. It doesn't matter, like you said, if they gave you the information 5 minutes before, and they wanted these intricate timings. I need this slide when I say this word, and I need this sound to crescendo when I get to this part, and I need I need doves to be released when I stand up. When they started to get to that point, I said, this is too much.
That didn't sound like a hypothetical.
It wasn't. That's the sad part. I remember an experience, someone came running up on Saturday morning and said, I need this to be displayed in these 3 places. And I said, we can't do it. But I really need it. We can't do it. He didn't understand why we couldn't do it, but I said we couldn't do it. So what he did was he ran behind my back to my son to ask him to do it, to try to force him to do it. And I think that's what pushed me over the edge. First of all, it's just uttermost disrespect because my word should have been the final thing. You were late, you didn't follow any protocols, and it couldn't be done. And for you to run behind my back and then you screwed up another service for your 5 minutes, and it was literally 5 minutes, I said, I'm done. And then COVID hit and I got to stay at home and do everything from home. So I'm okay. I have no burnout at this point. I roll out of bed, I get the system set up, I have wonderful experience with the pastoral staff. I'm good. But now I'm afraid of going back into the building because I'm not going back to what it used to be. I'm not doing it.
What do you mean by that?
What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
I cannot go back to the way church used to be. It was a full-time job for me. So volunteerism went out the window. And I love what Alex is saying about training another staff, but I was having trouble with training, and that's something I would really love to talk about.
Training is a completely different workload.
Yeah,
it's additional. It's the training. You know, they talk about different like taxes in terms of being in an academic environment. Oh, they put you on a committee. It's that you're getting taxed for X, Y, Z, right? Because your time is taken. Training takes a concerted effort. And it's not to be trifled with. And what it looks like is different for both the teacher and the student.
That's the key.
And that's the thing. Like, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm going to give you a book and everybody's going to read it. No, I've got somebody on a team that's like, no, I want to sit down with a notebook and write notes and like you learn how to use this device. And then I have other people where I'm like, here's a YouTube video. Just go watch the hour and a half. You have any questions? Come back to me. We'll go through whatever. We're done, right? We all learn a little different, but that training, it's difficult and it's taxing and it's time consuming, but it's so important. And I think that's always a struggle because I'm like, if I have a trainee on a hardware device or at a station and something slips, that's the one time someone's going to be like, oh, it's not perfect. What's the problem? And then their questions, as opposed to, you know, it went perfect, but you know, you're sitting there at the same station, not able to take a break. Can't take vacation. If you're not there, everything falls apart. We're talking about sustainability. I mean, I think one of the big things about COVID and the pandemic is it's changing what our expectations of what our workflow needs to be.
I think one of the other things that you have to consider with training that I always found was difficult. If you've been doing any of these kinds of things for a while, you realize that there are these levels of interaction that people can have that are entirely superficial, right? So think about someone who's coming and helping you with the AV, and they don't know any of the drama or the politics that's behind it. They're just manning a piece of equipment in a particular way and doing 2 or 3 things, and they're doing it for a period of time, and then they go home. And they're unaware of all this other stuff. But if you start training people, really training them so that you can have that free time that you're discussing, some of the whys will lead into some of the politics that's behind some of the things that are there. It's not really possible to properly prep someone for what they would have to do as a replacement for you, even for a week or two, without them starting to understand that there's more hidden stuff lurking beneath the surface. And that's where part of the challenge is, because you, at that point, you realize that some of that has to be fixed, because otherwise your trainee is going to abandon the mission and decide, nah, this is not what I signed up for.
I think my one word thing for like burnout is, generally speaking, environment.
Oh yeah.
Culture and environment. And my negative kind of slant to it initially in jest was, essentially ignorance in that environment. But like, if you have a good environment and people can understand, I think it's a lot easier. If you're trying to make a culture shift is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And transitioning that and changing that, I mean, it takes like a worldwide occurrence or something to make things change in some cases, because it just won't shift for any other reason. But that shift is so important, and it takes time. And if you're in the right environment, I think people can understand that you can ask to walk away and people understand. Hopefully. But that's not true. It's not true. But I mean, either you're going to have to take the time voluntarily, or something's going to give and you're not going to have a choice.
Well, if you want it to be more sustainable, you need to periodically walk away, like the whole vacation thing, visiting another church, whatever it takes. You need to do that beforehand, because if you wait until you're at the breaking point, even if they then acknowledge, it might not be enough to change your mind or to sway you. It might, their response to it may seem very superficial or circumstantial, and you may not appreciate it because it just looks like, oh, sure, because everything blew up, you went that way. But if you take the time early and they realize the quality, because like you said, the fact is they don't notice what they're missing. One of the things during the pandemic, and I mentioned this before, but looking at broadcast television and especially the news, I'm like, man, they're struggling to do this in the disconnected format. They are struggling. I'm seeing things that I never witnessed before in terms of bringing people, guests into the studio and all these other kinds of things. And so when people get used to that level of perfection, that level of that high standard, then they expect it. And so it's like, oh, wait, you only scored 31 points a game, but your average is 32. What's up with that? It's like, slow down, people, slow down. So if you take that time early on and people realize, ooh, there are these hiccups, they will actually begin to appreciate more what you do, and be more forgiving of steps that you recommend to providing backup of personnel and training and so forth. Otherwise you can have a terrible environment, in which case they don't get that. But
that sounds like customer education. That's expensive business, man.
Yes. Yep. See,
so is mental health.
Fair.
What
Fair.
I was going to point out is that in the trainee, you still need the trainee to have your level of desire. You do. It's hard to teach someone who doesn't care the same that you do. I think that's one of the reasons why certain NBA players didn't make good coaches. They were downright terrible coaches because they had a level of expertise, and when a certain person didn't meet that, the only thing they knew how to do was get frustrated. Some of the best coaches understood. Some of the best coaches weren't great players, so they know how it is to be scrappy, and they can sort of teach that. But once you reach the pinnacle, like for what we do, it's really not a part-time thing for any of us. We take our own personal time and invest it back. I do it for a living, so it's an easier transition to do it. All of us do it for a living. So it's an easier transition. But a lot of the people we work with, they're dentists, lawyers, doctors. And so to invest the amount, or kids, let's not forget the kids, because I really want to train up the kids. But when you were a kid, weren't you really interested in this?
Definitely. I mean, the interest for me kind of started with somebody that said, "Hey, why don't you come take a look at this?" Because I'd hang out at events or whatever with my dad, who actually did like do audio at one point during one of our family funerals. The AV person couldn't stay, so he actually had to run everything and lock it up after we were done. And so I got them to watch, doing all the knobs and the faders and all that stuff. And that got me interested, and then other folks kind of took over from there, from inviting me onto the front of house team and then our record team, and that actually spawned my particular career. But it started with that interest, and it was always like on a Sabbath morning, it was like, "Hey, mom and dad, I gotta go be on the board. Like,
Right.
I gotta be at church. Like, we gotta go." Now, my folks were very on time, so it wasn't too much of a problem. But there was always that, "Hey, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go." And they're like, "Hold your horses." But if you don't have that drive, you're just not gonna be willing to gut it out. Because first, there's that learning part that you have to do, and then it's like with anything, right? There comes that next part where you kind of transcend that learning curve, where then all of a sudden you take all these tools put together, and it's like it's automatically fun. Like you're using these things to like just take your creativity to whatever ends that you just can think of, right? And then once you've gotten that far and you mastered that, then there's the mastery of the entire concept of what you're doing. And then once you get there, that's when you're like, okay, it's like a Zen moment, and then you're taking that and then having to turn that back around and teach other people how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so really the thing is, if you don't have that internal passion all the way through that process, you're not going to be able to help somebody catch that, that bug. I really don't want to say that in the pandemic time, but
Well, that's more of a virus than a bug. So
yeah, but they got to catch on to that particular wave and want to ride that themselves and figure out how to do it. So but it starts internally, because I can tell you at Metro we've had a very
cool.
No, I gotta say that I think the pandemic has definitely had an impact on getting youth involved in volunteering, because I'd say towards the end of 2019, I started to see a lot more young people coming through every time I volunteered, and I'd be showing them how to use stuff, and then there'd be a different one and different, that they were trying to build a roster. And maybe some other churches were in the same kind of situation where they were trying to build a roster, or, deep in the field. And then COVID hit, right? Where you wanted as few people around each other as possible, right? I think that really derailed things. I think one of the, I know we're supposed to do a show on getting back to normal, or getting back into church or worship, whatever you. And I think reinvigorating, kind of sparking, reigniting the whole volunteer development effort has to be near the top of the priority list, because our special guest today, I think one of the things I really wanted him to highlight was that you really had a subset of the AV ministry team really doing the heavy lifting for at least the first part, or all most of 2020. And that, I think, took its toll, and I wouldn't be surprised if other ministries and other churches have had the same experience.
Yeah, and then there's going to be this interesting shift now, because you've had those folks doing all the heavy lifting. Let's say that you bumped your quality, right? When you go back, is it going to stay the same, right? Because now people are expecting, oh, we saw all this pretty shiny video, and the audio glistened and sounded amazing and angelic, except for all the mics that people are using from Apple. Don't use those headsets. But the point is, there's a certain expectation right now that's held of how things look and sound, and now we're going to go back to an environment where that's not as controlled. It's more open. So what do you do, right? Because the other thing is too, right? everything was edited a certain way and done a certain way and pieced together a certain way.
Tight quality control.
And the thing is, the more hands you put on this plow, potentially, the lower your quality is going to go until you can either bolster them up or you just say, hey, I'm going to take my ball and go home for some of the folks that might be, doing all that heavy lifting when we get back, right? And get to the environment. I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, just to that point, Corral, you had a team of people who really, by circumstance, got a lot more practice than they otherwise would have, right? Had a lot more development, worked a lot more as a team, and worked a lot more on the whole technical side than they normally would have because of the circumstances. The church became something within the four corners of a computer screen, right? Or a smartphone or a smart TV or what have you. So with that, maybe one of the strategies is to not necessarily break up that team, but have that team separate out into, notice I said break up and separate out. I'm trying to hide the fact I'm still saying break up, and have them be team leaders to train up other teams that can be as good as that core team has been over that long haul.
Well, that is predicated on this one thing, that the media team was handling everything. Because I can say in certain cases, that may not necessarily be the case. You may have a person that's a videographer and someone else that's doing editing, and they stepped up and said, okay, we'll handle this, right? I know of a situation like that. And so the thing is like, it that may have been the practice for them, but when church returns, that's not going to be the team that's going to be handling the business when we get back.
There are a lot of lessons that have to be learned. There are going to have to be a lot of after action reports written, because the forces that led to the culmination of these Justice League and Avenger teams manifesting all the prowess that they did manifest gets dissipated when you just hire some more police for Gotham and now you've got a totally different scenario when people go back. I think it's important that folks understand. I mean, think about this. How many churches actually had to spend a lot more money during this time? I know that there were some investments. I'm aware that some churches did some investments throughout this, but a lot of things were done because of the way, leveraging streaming or leveraging the tools that you guys bring to the table. What happens when the church tries to do that in-house and realizes, or doesn't realize, but is alerted to the fact that, oh, you don't have those tools here, and in order to replicate that, you're going to have to get those tools here, right? That's just one aspect of the differences that need to be rectified between those two.
And right on that topic, we've started talking about hybrid, but I don't think they understand what hybrid means. Hybrid means now we're going to be on location. Some people are going to be able to come out. We're going to have live service, and we're going to stream it. So when you think about the confines of the church, you think, well, all that equipment's already installed. We're not installing stuff every week to run for a 1 hour service. So I'm estimating it's going to be a 2 hour setup, and we can only be out there for 1 hour. In the county that we're in, we can only have a 1 hour service until they change that rule. So now we're talking about at least a 2 hour setup for a 1 hour service, and then a 1 hour breakdown just to do it every week. This is where burnout comes in, because most people who don't do this for a living aren't going to want to do this every week. And to get the rotating team, we got to rebuild our team from scratch. They haven't worked in a year.
Yep.
I mean, just cabling alone, man. Like when you're talking about infrastructure, but don't get me started on that. Like run conduit, put cables in the floor. I don't understand why we should do that.
We're talking about outdoors.
And I'm just saying, when it comes to it, the toll, because one of the churches I'm associated with had that little experiment where they went to another facility and there was cable being run week after week after week after week after week, and it takes a physical toll. Like doing it once, doing it twice, but then you're talking about the 12th time. Yeah, things get more efficient. You get better. You have a better sense of where everything needs to be. But physically, man, that just takes a toll on you.
And you only get better if it's the same team doing it every time.
Exactly.
So if you
which
have
by
to
the way, leads to burnout if it's exactly the same
Exactly.
team.
which also meant that some people needed an incentive to actually get it done, which ended up happening in one of the cases that I know about. So, you know, I mean, it's a very slippery slope.
But Andrew said something important. They're going to realize they don't have that equipment. One of the things that we were told is, oh, we can just take the stuff out from the church. I'm saying, okay, well, every time you plug and unplug and plug and unplug, that thing wears out quicker. So are you ready to replace it twice as fast? Or would we rather, as Colin mentioned, let's just hire someone. They'll come drop the equipment down. When we're done, they'll come pick the equipment up. The cost is effectively the same.
Right.
And the human cost is much less.
Yep.
So you guys want to have burnout or you don't want to have burnout? That's the question. What can we do to stop burnout?
And the big thing, right, is that if you were being prudent about things, you'd have somewhat of a soft launch, right? Where everybody was kind of getting back into the rigors of things. There's no discussion of soft launches or nothing. It's straight beeline we're heading for that door to get right in that door and do what we want to do. And the reality of the situation is, God, I hope the equipment's working all right. I really do. I mean, who's operated it the whole entire time we've been out?
That's one of the things I spoke to my church about is, believe it or not, having it be off for a year is worse than having it turn on every week because it's just sat there. So dust has settled. When we fire those neutrons and electrons up and they hit that dust, anything is possible.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in our case, we've had other events and other things that we've had to kind of get in there and do things. We have some maintenance passes that we're going to have to do, right? Comprehensive plans we're going to have to put in place to get things ready to go. But, you know, even with the discussion, nobody's really, you know, come and said, hey, so what's it going to take to get you guys going? You know, so, you know, I'm having to have those conversations and do what we need to do to have that out in front because, you know, people just think, oh, we're just going to return and it's just going to happen. And it's like, no, it doesn't happen that way. There's a lot of planning that needs to go in place of that. And, you know, the other thing is, too, catching up personnel with a lot of the restrictions and protocols that now have to go into place to keep everybody safe. Right? This is not a joke. And so there are a lot of considerations here that have to be thought about before you just, you know, go and do. And even with the thought of the young people and all of them, right? I'm gonna be looking out for them the hardest.
Yeah.
Honestly, being in leadership, because I am not going to be having them taken advantage of, you know, because they're willing to be there and want to serve. You know, I'm gonna utilize that enthusiasm as best I can, but we're going to leverage that in a way where it's used in a wise way and make sure that everybody's coming back in a way that they will be safe and looked after. I will not bend on that.
That's
I think there's an interesting kind of thought in there though, right? In terms of, I have this notion of sometimes we volunteer for things and people are like, instead of giving you a piece of it, they give you the whole thing. And I feel like this happens for some of the youth sometimes for certain things. Oh, you're a young person. Oh, you can do that AV thing. Here, have the entire church's website. Have the entire like social media presence, right? Instead of giving them a piece and saying, okay, work on that piece, they get the entire bag. I feel like it's one of those things when you talk about burnout, you think about the people that have been doing it for the longest, but sometimes the burnout can happen for the people that have been doing it the shortest because they've been burning the hottest. And sometimes learning how to ratchet that back and say, I can give you this, but I'm going to give you this so I can do it for this much longer. That's part of the skill. Like knowing, yeah, we can get that done, but it's going to cost me this much effort, this much time, this much skill to get done. We can meet your Everest, but we're not going to be able to maintain. And I think that's one of those things when, especially when it comes to the young people, maintaining that fire and turning it into something that can sustain as opposed to something that will, there are going to be walls. I personally don't want anybody that I interact with, like Andrew said, I want to blunt the blow of the politics so that they can learn the joys of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get burnt out because they went hot and then they just,
Mm-hmm.
they hit a wall. They heard no, you're not getting the money. We don't see the value in that. If they see that, sometimes people burn because of that. And that's a burnout in new people that I think is also important to note. If anybody watching is, hot and wants to do something, you gotta pick your battles, find your victories that you can get, and play the long game. Start playing chess instead of checkers.
It's almost like a double attrition when you burn out a young person, because you don't even get them to grow up into the position you've burned.
They
them
don't
out
grow.
young.
They don't, you don't get the sustainability. They don't bring friends. You lose the ministry.
And they will leave.
That's our problem.
Yep.
Because the thing, and that's the most insidious one, because you won't, they're not there now, but you won't necessarily see the numbers change for a while, right? Oh, the tithe dollars, where did they go? Oh, they didn't move anywhere because that young person, right? I mean, I'm not saying that's the metric to measure things by, but I'm just saying, like, their involvement, where does that go? You start feeling the pains of that maybe 5 years later, maybe 10 years later.
Well, that's when
sometimes
you notice
it's
it.
Immediate.
That's when you notice it, but it's been happening. You just didn't because it's an opportunity cost, right? That person would have brought people already, and you don't see it because you didn't see the loss instantly, but you already lost what you would have had. One of the biggest things in all the years that I've been on church boards is pushing back on the idea that as soon as someone volunteers and is competent, they should be elected. I'm like, no, leave them alone. They're happy and contributing, leave them where they are. Oh, but they're good. It would be great if no. Let them be, let the person we already have stuck on the board to be tortured periodically have someone that's competent, that doesn't have to be there, is not involved in the politics, and is able to move forward. And I say that across all of the church offices.
Not even real talk, some of the best technical people should not be in management. And the smart ones realize that they won't be happy there. They're not going to play the games. They want to do the job.
Yeah.
And there's some people that have the savvy to play the politics and do the management stuff and to handle and manage people. And we are all blessed with different skill sets. If you have a tech whiz that may not have quite the social graces or whatever, sometimes that's the worst thing you can do is put a technical person that's used to getting from A to B in a very particular way, and then going into an environment where they're talking about A, B, C through Z. Oh man, you want to talk about burnout? You're just asking to spark something there.
Sounds like my life. All right. So I was gonna have Colin pray us out. He's been really quiet this last half hour, so we'll let him close us out. And then I will say this before we close. I've actually heard some really good solutions about avoiding burnout, and I hope that the audience heard it too, just in terms of how to pace yourself and recognize what the difference between a ministry and a job, and how to ensure that management sees the same thing that you see. And if they don't, especially if you're a volunteer, you have options. You're not tied into it. So you get this opportunity to maybe step back. I do remember a team member of ours would always take a month off. We'd always just take March off. And sure, we would grumble at him, how are you taking March off? But 11 months out of the year, he was great. He just took that 1 month off. So it might be something, even in a leadership position, go visit another church. Go see if you can help somebody else. That might reinvigorate you. or go see, maybe you just need to sit with your family for a week and a half and experience that. So go ahead, Colin. You can pray us out.
Certainly. Heavenly Father, in everything that we do, guide us. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, so we do have to decide. I know that I flubbed the very beginning. We're still live. I flubbed the very beginning because I wanted to use this wonderful product that I got from Sandy Audio Visual, and I didn't have it quite set up properly. I have to tell you, this thing is awesome. Absolutely awesome. But the more awesome you get, the more complicated it is. So I want to talk about complexity next time we meet. Are you guys interested in that? The complexity of some systems, maybe how to simplify?
Sure. Yeah, streamlining is. Did he lose weight?
I hope. No, I cut my hair. So I shed a few pounds. I think.
So what are you using today?
Oh well, I had.
Okay, let me ask you.
Yeah.
Talking about streamlining, simplifying. What camera are you using today?
Oh, I'm using the Pocket 6K, the Blackmagic.
Okay.
But no, the complexity comes in with how I decided to wire everything today, and I just messed everything up. So there's some drawbacks to vMix, and so I was going to switch to the extreme ISO, the ATEM. But if you're not ready for it, you don't have the overlays, you don't have all that stuff, you really have to prepare to do a production. And so I wasn't prepared. So we'll tune in next time and then we'll talk about this.
Fine, we'll put it this way, Robert. Sometimes your most complicated or complex setup is the simplistic one that you have to come up with.
That's it. That's
Elegant is hard.
That is the 100% truth. Trying to minimize the amount of equipment you're using and still get the same results. It's amazing.
Real quick, I've been talking to programmers all week, and as they keep feeding ideas back to me, right, I reject them out of hand. I said, no, that's way too complicated. You don't have to do it that way. I know just enough to know that no. It's like, you go, no, that won't work for the end user. I don't like it. There's too many steps. You're feeding this into that, into that. No.
You must be talking about control surfaces.
No, but close.
No? Okay.
Who's programming a Crestron?
Yes, that's part of it. It's a complex system, yes, but the thing I need done is very simple. They're trying to
over-engineer it, yeah.
Over-engineer, no. Mm-mm.
And Crestron is easier.
Designs have come immediately after I have over-engineered something and had it combust.
All right, I'm going to sign off to let the people go, but we can stay on for just a few minutes longer and talk about this. Yeah, he's got to go eat. Is your mother-in-law cooking again?
Not quite.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want her in front of the stove in the moment.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Send my best wishes. All right.
I
goodbye,
will.
everybody.
Thank you for your prayers. See you guys.
Take care. I would recommend that